Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I am your host, Naeemah Khabir, and welcome back to another episode of Sunday Stories. Today is Sunday, the 17th of Dhul Qa'dah, and we are quickly approaching Dhul Hijjah. We're in the middle of Dhul Qa'dah now, and this is our second episode of the second season of Sunday Stories, and I'm joined today with brother Sabir Abdul-Haqq. He is a new member to BAM, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Alhamdulillah. Well, shukran. Thank you for having me. Assalamu alaikum to yourself and to the viewing audience. I am a 41-year-old Mississippi Muslim Black male, which is so many pop-ups all in and of itself. I am a graduate of New Medinah Islamic School System, following underneath the Clara Muhammad School System. And just glad to be here. I'm a jack of all trades, master of none.
Now, tell us a little bit about how your family came to Islam.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so I was born in Chicago. Some people knew my mother. She returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in 2014, but my mother, Rosa Sharif, she was married to Rosa Abdul-Haqq at the time. Rosa Najee was her maiden name. She married Lionel Abdul-Haqq in the very bustling and very thriving Chicago Islamic scene. I was born in Chicago in the Wild Hundreds, as they call them, South Chicago, and was raised, went to the Clara Muhammad School. That was off 74th and 74th and Stony, in Chicago. Islamic school system. I still remember some of those memories. I'm still in touch with some of those folks from back in the day. My good friend Salima, she now lives in Atlanta. Musali and Ishmael, I talk with their mom more because we do a lot of professional stuff, but was always involved in terms of things, in terms of the Islamic community. Even to this day, 35, 36 years later, people say, "Oh, Sabir, I remember you when you were this little." I had $1 for every time I heard that. But just definitely involved. And yeah, so we was there. My mother and my father split, and we moved to Dayton, Ohio for a while. And we lived in Dayton, Ohio until my mother had heard of the New Medinah experiment. I'm sure we'll get to talking into that in a minute. The New Medinah experiment following the plan of Elijahville, which was originally conceived out of Alabama, I believe it was. And it was following that concept of having black, predominantly, of course, Black, but then Muslim community established in rural parts of the country. And Elijahville was originally thought of in being in, again, I said Alabama, but then we had the concept of New Medinah, which is in Southwest Mississippi, roughly about 2 hours north of New Orleans. And so my mother met Alvin Sharif, and they married in '88, and that's what moved us from Chicago, Dayton, Mississippi. Oh, wow. Yeah, and it was definitely, we learned a lot. There were a lot of things we dealt with coming to the Bible Belt. I saw, of course, the name of this segment, establishing New Medinah, an Islamic community in the Bible Belt. It came with its definite, struggles and still stuff that we deal with even to this day. But people recognize who we are. They recognize what we do. They recognize what we will and will not stand for, as we all are just human, regardless of our culture, regardless of your religion, in terms of what you do. I don't live in New Medinah now. I'm making plans to move back within the next 2 years. I live in Brandon, Mississippi, which is just outside of Jackson. But I'm involved with New Medinah efforts in every way I can, including we just Memorial Day weekend, we had just completed the virtual retreat on Memorial Day weekend. So it's always something to do.
It's interesting that you bring up the retreat, because that's how I found out about New Medinah. I want to say maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, the New York Times did an article on New Medinah. Yes, I mean, I was blown away, because other than the Islamic community in West Valley, New York, which is some miles away from Buffalo. That was the only community that I knew of predominantly Black Muslims. And so I'm reading this article and I'm like, they're in Mississippi? So
Yeah.
what made them establish a community in Mississippi of all places? Because Mississippi is known to be one of the poorest states. They're known to be one of the states that has doesn't have a good track when it comes to K through 12 education, and just the fact that it is the Bible Belt. So
as you bring up a lot of good points. So one of the things, of course, history has taught us that people fear what they don't know, and then they hate what they fear, right? I think one of the main things, so again, to go back to your question, as I touched on before, I remember one of the earliest T-shirts. And again, I'm 41. I can still remember these memories from little boy. Like all the other adults had these T-shirts that said, and this is a local record shop. That's the T-shirt I'm wearing. I just tossed the T-shirt on, so that's what that is. But they had these T-shirts that said, "The spirit of Elijahville lives on in New Medina, Mississippi." And so again, it was the concept. I mean, I learned this younger because I'm dealing with my elders who had embedded this upon me, saying like establishing this community life, following the spirit of Elijahville, again, out of Alabama. And so when we had, I don't remember it, I was like 6 or 7 years old, but of course we've had Imam Worthy Muhammad, may Allah be pleased with him. He was there, I still remember we were still officially in Dayton. My mom hadn't remarried at that time, but I remember we had come down with a contingent of Muslims from Ohio, and the Ohio, pretty strong Muslim community in the Dayton, Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio area. And I still remember, you can look down to where our pavilion is now. And I still remember back to this day, like it was yesterday, it was rows of tents, like it was a bazaar, like there was hardly no sun touching the ground in that area. There's that many folks. And it was an exciting idea, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks, like you said, we had heard about y'all up and, about this, about the community in New York. We had heard about that. We had heard about other organizations and other communities doing something similar. But yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age, social media and the internet has made it so that our borders are shorter now. I mean, you can connect so much quicker, right? Able to make those different things happen. But like I said, it wasn't without its trials and tribulations. My late mother, Rosa Sharif, her and my father, Imam Alvin, my dad, Imam Alvin, at the time when we first came down here, he was known for teaching computer classes in the local Hattiesburg. Hattiesburg is roughly about 30 minutes away from New Medina, 30 minutes east of New Medina. He was teaching in a computer bus, so everybody knew him. They was like, "Oh, that's your dad teaches in the okay, cool. That's your dad. All right, cool." And they knew that way, right? Of course, your young folks, whatever. And my mother was a writer. She would write articles in the local Hattiesburg American newspaper. And so she saw that as an option. Robin Jackson, she's a great person. I have not talked to her in years. She did reach out to me after mom had passed, so I believe she's alive and well. But she was always like, "We appreciate your mother for what she was doing in terms of helping to the area that New Medina is called the Pine Belt." So if you got the Bible Belt, the Pine Belt is the buckle of the Pine Belt. Right? So the Pine Belt, she was like, "We appreciate your mother for all she was trying to do." She never tried to, browbeat anyone with Islam. She never had to deal with nothing from my staff. She was, Robin Jackson was over the Caucasian white lady. She was over the city staff for Hattiesburg American, and she ran her unit how she saw fit, and the newspaper supported her. And I'm sure she probably got a little flack for who these black people saying what they about to do and this, that, and the third. But she gave my mother full reign. And that, plus we've got members of our community that are military armed forces veterans. We've got members of our community that are philanthropists. My uncle is a doctor in nearby Laurel, Mississippi, who runs an OBGYN practice and also does philanthropic efforts in Hattiesburg. New Medina itself has been the linchpin for a lot of community efforts. New Medina was like the site for different things. I'm trying to give you a small timeline, but those are how people got to know, and they knew of our parents and our families and our people in our area based on what was happening. They didn't give people any real issues. At one point, there was a little bit of xenophobia. I remember my first time doing any activism, I might have been 12 or 13 years old, dealing with the Bosnian conflict. We were out there by the Hattiesburg courthouse, picketing, talking about peace in Bosnia. I still remember that to this day. So I think our elders, everyone was trying to find different ways of saying, look, establish, say that there's something that means much to you, and respect other people. And that respect will garner a level of regard. And that's what happened with some of the efforts for establishing and but communicating Dean and Dunya that my mother used to write in her articles, that my dad used to do with teaching people how to be able to, teaching kids how to use computers. With some of the organizing efforts, we actually started a community group called People in the Community Helping, or Pitch, right? And that was an offshoot to it was more of it was an organization dealing with we called it Marion County Self-Help, but it was a group dealing with agriculture and sustainability. And so my mother was also a grant writer, and her and a couple of other sisters, Sister Florence, Sister Hafiza, in the community they would help put together the guts of the organization and other folks, and we would work with non-Muslims in the outside area. And we did something for the entire county that New Medina resides in, Marion County, Mississippi. And so it was open for everybody else. And it was about sustainability. It didn't matter about your race, didn't matter about your background, your culture, and it didn't matter about, where you were, your status or anything, right? And so Mixed Show offered that. And people say, you know what? Them Muslims, they all right. Them Muslims, they do okay, We done came there, our kids play with their kids, and we done got the hay bales and the chickens and the sheep, and so they realize ain't nothing to worry about. These folks. Right. And unfortunately, the media, particularly around the early 90s, that's right around the time, unfortunately, the Oklahoma City bombing happened, right? Big xenophobia. That's probably the only kind of xenophobia we kind of really dealt with. It was right around that time with everything happening and Timothy McVeigh and all these other stuff, right? And
I think that was what, 95? Yeah, I think that might have been 95 when they had. So New Medina was started around, like you said, maybe, was it late 80s or was it?
Late 80s. Late 80s, yes, ma'am. New Medina started really broke ground in 86. 87. 86, they were kind of like surveying the land. 87 really was when it really got jumped off. And then, so we used to live in Hattiesburg, Mississippi before living on New Medina proper, right? Hattiesburg, one of the things that really kind of drove it home for us that we had to start our own school. Unfortunately, a little bit of xenophobia. The superintendent and assistant superintendent at that time, we were, I'm at that point 10, 11 years old. It's 90, 91. I'm observing Ramadan, and the teachers were cool with it. They had heard, they knew what Ramadan was in terms of fasting. For any of your non-Muslim listeners or whatever, the month of fasting that Muslims observe. But what we wound up doing was that we would go in the library while the rest of the classes were going to lunch. It wasn't forced upon us. My mom and dad, and our folks weren't like, you better observe Ramadan. We were young still at that time. We're like, yeah, I'll do it, no problem. Well, they, at one point they were like, you're starving your kids. We're gonna call DHS. We're gonna starve your starving kids. Parents like, you know what?
Deuces.
Holla at you. And that was the last year. And we established a very humble, very modest school in a trailer. We had a trailer out there on New Medina. New Medina sits on, we invite people to look at it. You invite your audience to look at our website, newmedina.org. We're going to be updating some stuff on there and having more pictures and aerial shots of the land. It sits on 64 acres of rural farmland in New Medina. We've got some families out there, some even non-Muslim. The non-Muslim outer community knows who we are. but it was very meager, very, very humble, very meager beginnings in a trailer. And then alhamdulillah, Allah blessed us to be able to go ahead and have a larger masjid. We moved out of that trailer, but we still know where we came from because you got to walk on top of where that trailer was every time. So alhamdulillah, we were able to find common ground. I think the way how New Medina started humble and it continues to live humbly, but then also in terms of ways of how we can be able to get involved with the outer community. You've got New Medina. Outside of that is what we call the Little River community. Outside of that is what we call the Blue Springs community. Outside of that is Improve. Outside of that is Olo. So it's just one big, it keeps going in. But everybody from, I'd have to say Olo on down knows who New Medina is and know what we deal with. Alhamdulillah, we just did, I co-founded an organization that deals with voting rights. And we were hit really hard down here in February after the winter storm that shocked like the South. There were people that died, unfortunately, in their house. They froze to death, not in New Medina proper, but in some of the outside communities. And so a lot of us banded together to do like food drives and, voter registration to make sure folks were going. New Medina was a part of that effort. I made sure New Medina was a part of that effort. And a lot of us, our kids growing up, we're all gray hair and everything else, older and everything now. But it's, I think in terms of how New Medina has been involved and in terms of the external non-Muslim community and what have you, people just understanding that we have common goals, common interests, common beliefs. We all bleed. You cut us, do we not bleed? Regardless, we all have that shared sense of vision. And it's important that everyone realize the humanist aspect to that we just all want to be able to help each other and live our lives as best as we can.
Now, it sounds like to me, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, it sounded like this community drew a lot of like professional Muslims, people who were able to come down to this rural area of the country and still be able to make connections with the larger society, non-Muslim society. Was this, now you can correct me, was New Medina came out of the Imam W.D. Muhammad community? Was that one of his goals? Was that something that he initiated?
So great question. So Elijahville was something that had come from Elijah Muhammad, of course, Worthy Muhammad's father. It was the idea of a concept of there being a Black Muslim community, a professional community, a community by which that can be able to thrive and prosper. I'm not going to say that we're 400% like right on the money, but we were trying to do something that would follow that. To follow, again, as a t-shirt used to say, the spirit of Elijahville lives on in New Medina. And that was definitely one of the things we were pushing for. I think that there was a lot of growing pains. There was a lot of things like, man, if we could have done this differently, what could we have done? There was definitely a lot of that happening. But I think that we definitely appreciated what we learned from it. I think that, I hope I'm answering your question, that it did come from that vision. That was the whole vision of New Medina, was to be able to look at what we're going to do. One of the things we're trying to do now, and what we were hoping to do this last retreat, and we're going to do even more for next retreat, will be touching base with individuals, because we've got 64 acres. All 64 of those acres are owned by different, individuals and people. And we're hoping, one of the things I hope that, individuals that may see this video or see this publication may hear about it and say, you know what? Didn't Papa own some land down there in Marion County? Unfortunately, he returned to Allah. We need to go see him, So, because we've had individuals that have purchased, men, women, families that have purchased the land, but not everybody's living on the land.
Right. And that's how I became aware of them, because the New York Times article was touching on the fact that so many young people, they had left for various reasons, for education, right, for marriage, right, whatever. Right. And so you have these elders who are thinking, how is this community going to continue to thrive if our children and grandchildren don't come back?
Correct. And And that's one of the things I know, like I did like a lot of technical direction for this last retreat. And so, and that's one of the things we really want to put on as a landowner meeting, like to get folks here. There's a lot of folks, unfortunately. Uh, uh, my cousin lives in Iowa. I have a cousin that lives in Iowa. He was raised in Islam. He's not exactly like fully like practicing, but he's very familiar with his mom was. His mom was. But if he were to say, you know what, I mean, he's told me a couple of times he's had to deal with some serious racism in his neighborhood, in his area, unfortunately. And so some people might be looking for something to be grounded back into things. Well, we hoping that we can be able to use, we can be able to market better and say, look, first off, we're going to touch bases with the people that own 15, 5, 10, 7 acres and say, do you still want this? Because we got individuals that want to come down here until we touch bases with folks. And then to be able to tell these folks, we have this available. Are you interested in going ahead and moving in? New Medina would love to have you. Mississippi is a much smaller cost of living than virtually anywhere else.
Right.
I think that's one of the things, and you touched on it before, in terms of, unfortunately, the K through 12 education. In terms of some of the things Mississippi is among the last in everything good and the tops in just about everything bad, unfortunately. And I know I graduated from University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. Everybody was like, oh, I'm getting out of Mississippi. I'm like, y'all thinking wrong. If you got the right initiative, you can set your footprint here and be fine. So, and that's definitely how I've done things, and how some of my colleagues have looked at things, Muslim and non-Muslim. But I think that there is opportunity in Mississippi. There's opportunity in New Medina. And yes, it's years later. I've got far more gray hairs than when I went to college and everything else like that. I've got a family now. My youngest is up front playing PlayStation, playing PS4. He's 11 years old. But we go down and help out. We help out my parents, his grandparents, and my grandmother, his great-grandmother is still living. And we're down there doing as much as we can, as much sweat equity as we can, because we want people to see how important New Medina is. And not just New Medina, how important Islam and how important the community itself can be, and how we can be able to go ahead and live by example and do the right things and show that we can be a commingling. And that we're not those scary Muslims, oh my God, that starve their children and the women dress funny. And look, and so I've even had, and I'll just share this one thing. One of my good friends, I was ripping and running so much. One of my best friends, he's not Muslim, but he's grown up. You know, we've known each other since we were 16. We were busy doing some other stuff, and it was Zuhr, and I kept running. He was like, Sabir, you made prayer yet? So he's from a part of Mississippi called Lexington. And we tell that story every now and then. And so every now and then, if I'm ripping and running, he'd be like, did you got prayer here about? And so now he knows the prayers. He'll look at the clock. He's like, it's time for Asha, ain't it? So he'll be like, one of my other good friends, I was saying, one of my good friends' dad, he's a military vet. He swore a good friend of his who's not Muslim into office in Hattiesburg. At that point, he was a municipal judge. He swore him on the Quran. Their best friend growing up. He's not Muslim, but he asked to be sworn in on the Quran. So it's different things. You can find your impact and your influence, and people can be able to see down here, word leads to action, action leads to reputation. People will trust your reputation. Also, as an old saying that some of our elders probably used to say, your word is your bond and you'll die before your word fails you. So, and it's encroached down here. It's encroached down here. And that's definitely something that people live by and they want to be able to honor. And so ultimately, when people get to learn your reputation, they get to learn your action, they get to learn your word, they get to learn who you are and what you are not capable of, you can do a lot of good things.
And so you said that you moved there when you said where you were maybe about what, 6, 7 years old, you moved to New Medina?
To Mississippi, New Medina.
Right,
we
moved to Hattiesburg first. Okay.
Yeah, Hattiesburg. We lived in Hattiesburg. I was 8 years old, but we moved up to the county. We moved to a house near New Medina, within I had to say a bike ride away from New Medina proper in 91, and then moved on the land itself, probably around 93.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of things I think coming to the country, I don't know if I'd be the same person if I was not in an Islamic environment, if I was not, I'm not saying, I mean, unfortunately, there's all kind of things in this world, right, that unfortunately tend to get people involved in. But I do know, I tell my son all the time, my sons all the time, it starts raining outside. They're like, Dad, you don't want an umbrella? I'd be like, Saber, I've delivered a calf in flood water when I was 14 years old. I'm fine. I ain't worried about no rain. So right. I can't say that I would have done that. I can't say would have done that if I had still been in the city, or I'm like, you touch all this. There's a sense of, when you have this humble living, you have a sense of humble beginnings and upbringings, and some of the experiences you have, alhamdulillah, can kind of give you a different appreciation towards certain things. Right. Chickens, halal chickens. We raise chickens from, it's a Amish community in nearby Tylertown, about 45 minutes west of New Medina. We've been supporting them for the longest, and we'll get our chicks from them. We had one family in New Medina. They do honeybees. So we've raised chicken, we raised St. Croix sheep. A good friend of mine, I remember I was in college, and a sheep got loose, and I know how to round a sheep up without wearing myself out. He said, "No, I'm gonna get this sheep," and it was hilarious. I wish at that point we had like smartphones to capture him trying to keep a sheep in Tim's. It was hilarious.
Not in Tim's.
In Tim's. He's from Chicago. He's from Chicago and Jackson area. But trying to see him chase down a sheep, a very quick, like NFL level linebacker, sheep and Tim's, was hilarious. But we finally rounded up the sheep. He was like, "That's something I don't think I would have ever seen, Sabir." It's just, so it's a sense of, it's a humbling experience. Sometimes when you deal with some of the hardships, like you said, like being the last in this or being the first in that or whatever else, there's certain things you have to understand, you have to overcome. But in the process of doing that, persevering and being able to have that spiritual and mental level of endurance, I think the maturity I have now, alhamdulillah, I wouldn't have had I not gone through that. And some other people I could say that are doing something similar. Not everybody would agree with that, I don't know, but that's just how I took it.
I think it's difficult for Black American Muslims to wrap their heads around being in a rural setting, because when we look at the predominantly Black American Muslim movements, like the Darul Islam movement, like the Nation of Islam, and some of them, and a lot of them moving into under the leadership of Imam W.D. Muhammad, when we look at the Ansar community, when we look at all these Black American Muslim-led organizations, they got started in the big cities, Chicago, Detroit, Brooklyn, New York, and they had all these different chapters throughout these major cities. And so people, when you think about Islam among Black Americans, it always starts with these big, large, congested metropolitan areas. And so people trying to shift from being in these cities to being in rural areas like New Medina, like West Valley. We had another sister on in, I want to say maybe March. She, her family broke with the Darul Islam movement and started following under the Fuqara, that organization. They moved to South Carolina. So what we're seeing is like all these Muslims who are coming from these cities and then going into these rural communities, and it's a culture shock. What advice could you give for people, those who will watch this, and maybe they're living in the big cities and they say, you know what, maybe it's time for a change. What advice would you give them about adjusting to this rural lifestyle?
So adjusting to a rural lifestyle, I understand that rethink what it means for convenient. Rethink what it means for what you contend to be every day. Rethink what it means, and come with no expectations. As long as if someone's interested in moving to, and you also got other places. I think Weatherford, Texas, at one point they had a Muslim community they were establishing out there. I had lost touch with my friend over there. I got to touch base with them. I would love to check in with them. But you got a lot of different communities, like you were saying, that are doing different things. as long as you can rethink what it means and basically pinpoint what it would be like, what would my family need to survive? Because I would imagine what I make here, I work for a hospital doing IT support. What I make here would probably be probably about $90,000 up in New York. I don't make nowhere near $90,000 in Mississippi. You live very well in Mississippi. And some people might be like, what? 90? You think about the DMV area, you think about New York area, you think about some places y'all have higher costs of living.
Yes.
You can do okay down here in Mississippi with 45K. You can do, I have my own business. I also work for a hospital. I don't make nowhere near 95K. I'm not hurting. Could be better, but I'm not hurting. And so rethink about what it means. So even when you're in humbler environments, you're in a humble surroundings, some of that means that you can still be able to do what you can. Yes, there may be a change in terms of your children. I don't want to leave my friends. And I don't want to. Yeah. That's why we've got airplanes and trains and automobiles. Yes. There's other different things about how things happen. Is there going to be a situation where people look at you differently in terms of a lifestyle? That may happen. But let folks understand that, in terms, sometimes there's a smaller amount of thinking. This world is not what it was in the 80s and 90s. I grew up having to deal with some of that level in my family and other, especially our sisters, unfortunately, just because your clothing is different, way you carry yourself is different, may throw people off. But then they understand the level of respect that goes with it. There's far more understanding in this world. It could be better. It ain't perfect. Not in the United States, not in the South, not in Mississippi. It's not perfect. But people recognize actions and they recognize the respect that goes along with it. I think just to come with no expectations, and if someone was really interested in doing it, finding jobs and opportunities. Right now, I'll say, unfortunately, because of all the different things, the healthcare community is booming here. The NGO community, the military community is booming here. And so finding a niche, if someone was really interested in doing that, if you can find a way that your niche, your skill set, your job, your degree, your career, your industry can fit into that. Yeah, there's a lot of different things. Socially, there's Hattiesburg. It took for Hurricane Katrina came in 2005. Hattiesburg now, compared to before Katrina, the mayor that was then and the governor of Mississippi at that point, there was a lot of disaster relief efforts that completely changed Hattiesburg from what it was. Downtown did not have a life at all. Now it's bustling all through the day. And Hattiesburg is a city of 50,000 people. Jackson is a city of 160,000 people. Both of them are considered Black cities. You've got suburban areas in each one of those spots that have growing communities. And then just about everywhere, there's like one big company that might be, whether it's Howard Industries, whether it's, like I said, the hospital systems, there's a lot of opportunity that's down here. People just kind of think like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do with $55,000 a year? $55,000 in a family of 3, 4, you'll be okay.
Okay, right.
And then of course it's a matter of doing things different. It's a different sociology down here. It's a different economics down here. And I'm by no means am I telling people to sell themselves short. By all means, grow up, and grow, and establish yourself and do differently. Good friend of mine, one of my fraternity brothers, I saw him yesterday, and he actually lives like probably about 5 miles from me. And he's about to retire from police and go ahead and do solely stuff in the court. He's like, I'm tired of doggone law enforcement, and these young folks don't know what they're doing. But just listening, he and I were chopping it up, talking about each other's professional lives. And I felt proud for him, and he and I used to have static because of how sometimes police get on my nerves. But I thought I felt like a sense of genuine warmth and friendship from him. I hadn't seen him in a while. He's a good friend of mine. But I say, like, anybody can really come down here. The same thing that people think that, oh, the South, or oh, Mississippi, or oh, this, or oh, that, why would you want to do that? that's one of the main reasons you want to stay. That's one of the reasons you want to establish yourself. Find that spot in the vacuum and grow in it, and just really be able to make something happen. Now, if you have no interest in it, no initiative, no drive or whatever, maybe Mississippi might not be for you. But by all means, just come by and visit. But there's always a way to be able to do things and really be able to cherish and bloom and network and cultivate. I myself am one of now 6 people. We established it used to be called Jackson Black Pages. Now it's the Mississippi Black Pages, which is a directory of online Black-owned businesses. And I handle all the tech needs and some of the logistics for the organization. And we try to be able to do things. We work with folks on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, which is roughly about 2.5 hours south, all the way up north to almost Memphis in DeSoto County. I've worked with nonprofit organizations, and I've been to probably 79 of Mississippi's 82 counties, sociopolitically, geopolitically involved with anything dealing with community organizing. There's all different kinds of ways to do things. Establish your niche. And as I tell my kids now, I was like, if y'all want to start your own business, fine, but you treat people right, you give them a service, they will be the path to your front door. It's just a matter of just finding a niche. I mean, Mississippi may seem to be, oh my God, and scary, and Mississippi does have a oh my God and scary past. But it's about being able to draw and be able to make the best of what's happening now, and to be able to do things for your family and for your community.
Now, can you explain to us, what was it like leaving New Medina and going to study? You said you studied at the University of Southern Mississippi, going out into like this outer world and, going from a majority Muslim community to going to being like a religious minority in college?
Interesting. And so I was in school. Great question. I was in school when 9/11 happened, right? And so I was in school. This was that would have been my sophomore year. Yeah, my sophomore year. I think people realized, some of the friends I've known, like the gentleman that was chasing the sheep down in the Thames, we'd known each other since freshman year. So since we were like 18 years old, at that point I'm 21. That was my junior year when 9/11 happened. What it was like, I think it was a matter of establishing ourselves. People say like, your name is different. You're this, you're that. Who do you know that young lady? Is she kin to you? Because I know y'all Muslims. That. No. And I introduced the sister, whatever, this, that, and the third. So I think one of the main things that used to really throw me off, I'll share a quick story. I was working as a staff, and we had I was working in a staff retreat, and it was out at a lake at a place. We all had different professional development we had to do. And I'm an expert kayaker. I'm not trying to, and canoeist. I'm not trying to toot my own horn and everything, but I love canoeing. I love kayaking. Been doing it since I was a kid. And a good friend of mine was from New York, and he, of course, ain't never been canoeing. He's scared, right. But he was like, Sabir, I'm putting my life in your hands. So we're out there, and while we're out there, Caucasian couple, their boat capsizes, and I tell my friend what to do, and we plucked them out the water without capsizing our boat, and we paddled them into safety. And they were getting lit up, and they had no idea while they were down there, they were also getting tore up by jellyfish. Didn't know there were jellyfish in the water, so they were getting tore up by jellyfish. So this was like a salt lake. We get inside, and again, at this point, I had been at USM. I had been in school for 3 years. So these same folks, we get them, they're treated for their wounds and everything. We make it back on campus shortly after 9/11 happens. I decide to go in full, your full outfit, wearing like as if you were doing Hajj, like your full hijab, everything else you're wearing there. And I talk about Islam. I wrote an article in the paper, in the school newspaper, talking about what jihad actually meant. And it did not mean holy war, it meant struggle. That you can go ahead and, if you bust your tail and you sweat and blood trying to go ahead and graduate, guess what? That's a
Yeah.
put your soul into that. And I was at I had rented one of the auditoriums and it was probably about 40 people there that night. But door opens up and someone comes storming in and telling us about, oh, y'all are going to hell. And said, da, 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 da. It's the same lady that my friend and I had plucked out the lake. And we had plucked out the lake like a couple months before, like no sense of gratitude. She knew I was there. My name was under the what's the name? Like, you know who I am. There's only one Sabir Abdul-Haqq on the entire campus. And I let her finish because she interrupted my conversation. I was explaining to them about Hajj, I was explaining to them about the 5 pillars of Islam, I was explaining to them about who Muhammad was, explaining to them what Jesus meant in terms of the Quran, explaining the prophets. I had professors there that night. I had members of theology there, of different clergy there that night, some friends and everything else. And I was just about to go ahead, I let her finish, and was just about to go ahead and correct her. A good friend of mine who is Caucasian, he's Albanian. He stood up and he kind of lit into her, respectfully, but was like, you're not about to come up in here and act this way. And he had several other folks, and they had to check them because they knew my character.
Right.
While I was trying to do different things, and especially in the time frame of 9/11, right? So I think that it again became a thing of show and prove, be able to say, like, if people know who you are, they be like, I know Sabir, I've known Sabir this X number of years. This is the same Sabir that, we pull up, and my guy who was in the canoe with me, he was just dumbstruck. Like, every now and then we still talk about that. He was like, I don't know what was on her bird that made her think that she can go ahead and say that after you just got finished pulling them out the water. So it was just a matter of saying that when you can establish yourself and to be able to show an example of certain things, there's certain things that used to make my eyes bug out and everything else. And I would have to say, like, even growing up in the 90s, again, going through everything from the Oklahoma City bomb, the World Trade Center, World Trade Center in Oklahoma City, dealing with that, there was quite a bit of bigotry I had to deal with. I've told other people this. I've dealt with bigotry from people that look like me based on my culture than I have from somebody that's a different skin color, ever. I've been in Mississippi I've been in Mississippi 33 years, ain't never been called the N-word, not to my face. It'll be a different conversation, but it ain't not to my face. And from folks working professionally in IT realms, folks doing things in terms of the socio-political field, people that I don't agree with. One of my best friends at work, he and I do not agree with things socio-politically, but we respect each other to a point professionally. It has turned into a friendship. And this dude is twice my size, white, bald male. So when you can be able to do different things in college, I think I came in not with rose-colored glasses, but there was a bit of naivete. And I learned not to harden myself against it, but to be ready for it and to be able to say that let's operate on a sense of what should happen and what can happen and build on that.
Right.
People be able to say, okay, well, Sabir is not this, and Sabir being a representative, a Black American representative of something I don't know a whole lot about, maybe I can ask him questions. Maybe we can do these different things. And really be able to pull things in that way. And it got to the point, folks, some of the holiest rollers in terms of Christianity and everything else, was like, hey, I know my book says this about you and your culture, Sabir, but I don't agree with all that. And I think that what you and your religion is doing is beautiful. Continue to do it.
So when you graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi, did you go back to New Medina or did you go somewhere else? Do you find that people in your age group or those who came before you felt like, okay, I need to go out and see the world before coming back to New Medina, or they just said, I'm done with New Medina?
So I just really wanted to be able to find a spot that I could be able to, for as much as I had been in New Medina and involved in New Medina, I was like, I need to strike out on my own. I ain't trying to live with my folks all the time. I want my own spot, on my own stuff. I think that I was, I laugh about that. It's a great question. I was $300 trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had $300. And I was trying to like, what did I want to do? There was a plane ticket to Minnesota to a nonprofit that deals with technology. It was roughly $300. I owed the university like $300 and they would release my transcript. I was wanting to go back to school for graphic arts and to get a graphic design associate's degree. Or a good friend of mine in Jackson, Mississippi, there was a job offer for me with a nonprofit up here that I had grown up involved with. And he was saying like, well, the cut for this month is $300. So really my destiny was shaped around $300.
$300.
And so as much as I wanted to stay in the Hattiesburg area, like near New Medina, I knew Jackson was only like an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So let me go ahead and strike out on my own. And so that was 2003. That was 2003. And I've been up here, but still involved with New Medina every opportunity I can. Still, get down and visit. That's Hattiesburg is home away. Well, Hattiesburg and New Medina is always going to be home. And again, like I said, I'm trying to be back down there within the next 2 years and actively working on that. But yeah, so that's kind of where it was. And I did want to strike out on my own. I did want to do different things. I've since been involved in many different initiatives, had a lot of life experiences, got a lot of bumps and bruises on the way. But yeah, I really appreciate it for everything it was. There's certain things I wish I could change and some things I'm accepting for what they were.
So right now, because the age that we're living in, a lot of people in the BAM group, they have either lost at least one parent or they are losing parents. I mean, that's just the nature of, where we are. Nobody lives forever and our parents are returning to Allah. And so it's up to our generation to step up and now we're becoming slowly but surely becoming the elders in our communities. So what would you do differently? I know you said that you're actively planning to move back to New Medina from Jackson, where you are. What changes would you like to see with New Medina?
So one of the first things, there's two main things I would love to see happen very soon. One of which we're working on first, and that is the population of New Medina, right? Okay. New Medina is 64 acres, but we're only, 9, 10 families? And a lot more that we can be able to pull out, down there to be able to go ahead to get things going. So one of the main things we're actively working on, we started on this retreat, we're going to do it in stages and to really be able to touch base with folks, track down people and say, hey, what's going on? You still want this property? Touch base with families, they're, survivors of families, folks who have returned to Allah, be able to say like, look, what, are you going to go ahead and what's going to happen with this? Because your family doesn't use anything back. They're going to sell it back to New Medina and then come up with a process to be able to say, hey, this is available. We have this for sale. Come on and get in. That's one of the first things we're working on now, actively within the New Medina Islamic board and everything else, touching bases and tracking down those folks and being able to say, hey, what would you like to do? That's the first thing. The second thing is working on, I think, those organizations I was talking about, Marion County Self-Help Organization, which was an agricultural group. We had People in the Community Helping, which was a community group. And then we had Ready, which was a youth group out of Pitch. They all kind of stacked on top of each other. Getting those organizations back started because that has not happened. I know my mom passed in 2014. We've had other folks, and sometimes when you have different things that happen, New Medina being a linchpin, sometimes the work gets heavier and heavier on the shoulders that are there. What we need is newer, younger shoulders to pick that up so that our elders are not left to deal with that. Continue having New Medina being shown as the linchpin for how we can, and the example on how to do different things and how we can all make things happen for everyone. So that's the second phase. Third phase is where do we go from here? New established projects. There are projects for establishing a small healthcare. There's ideas, talks, and plans about establishing healthcare in the area, establishing different philanthropic adventures and everything. We do have, we're working on our boarding school right now, the New Medinah Islamic School boarding school. We do still have our school available, but it is completely remote. And that was before COVID. Everything was completely remote learning. We do have Islamic teaching and everything else. My dad is the principal, Imam Alvin is the principal. And we also have, I'm on the board, I'm on the school board. So we have a school board that we're constantly shaping the curriculum on. And we've had people contact us and say, you know, oh, my daughter was, and this is a real story, actually. A young lady, this mother contacted us, and my daughter's in JROTC, and she had a very, you know, busy schedule. And we want to be able to do things to a point where, so she can get caught up, she's not falling behind. We're not Muslim. Can we still get in your system? Like, absolutely, come on. So this was a few years back.
Wow.
Yeah, being able to market the school. And then we also want to establish this boarding school so that folks that can come here, they can send their students here. The students have a place to live on site, and then, you know, they can get back to their families. But those are things we need to have done, definitely in terms of recapturing and repopulating everything from New Medinah, you know, getting our folks on that really do have that land ownership, and that some folks that no longer want that land anymore in terms of what they originally thought, and then finding new people, marketing and finding new people to be able to come move out, to be able to really be able to go ahead and get the community initiatives back involved with Big Show, Pitch, and Ready. And then I would say, like, some of our other plans in terms of the boarding school. And as soon as things kind of clear up with some things with COVID, we're already, I think that's going to be toward the end of this year or middle of next year, where we'll get everything started back up with the remote learning. So, yeah.
Now I have a question for you, because I think Imam W.D. Muhammad's community is probably the only community that I know of, Black Muslim community, that does boarding schools. I actually met a sister, this was in 2010. I was in Atlanta for a wedding, and I was going back to Philadelphia, and I was in the airport, and I met a sister there, and she was from Pittsburgh. She was originally from Pittsburgh. And she said that she was sent to Atlanta to go to an Islamic boarding school. And I just remember thinking and I believe she might've been 14 at the time when she was sent down. And I would just remember thinking to myself that growing up, I just thought boarding schools were for affluent white people. You know, we have a boarding school here in Philadelphia called Girard College, but it's for underprivileged youth. But, you know, just boarding schools in general, I always associate that with affluent white families. And so to hear Black Muslims saying, hey, you know, my parents had a place to send me, and they were perfectly fine with it, and I was fine with it. I mean, how do we get back to that? I know everybody is not down with boarding schools and things like that, but for those who want the option, especially if they live in a city or an area where there are no Islamic schools, or the Islamic schools are not up to their standards, you know, just being able to have that option there. For those of us who may be hearing about this for the first time, how can we support New Medinah? How can we support the projects from where we are?
Gotcha. So we are in the process of, we're working on how we're going to do things with our MBA, the Muslim Business Association, and we're reworking some of the ways how we do our organizing body, some of our internal workings. But for right now, follow us on social media. newmedina.org is the website. We're also on, I need to go and set up our Instagram. I keep forgetting to do it, but we usually just use it, Facebook, New Medinah Islamic Community. We're also on Twitter at New Medinah. But if there's different things that are happening, we would love to be able to have folks be able to say, you know, please share our information. Please, you know, have these different things that are out, because we want for folks to be able to be aware. All right, we want people to know about these different things that are happening. There's a donate button that's on the website. We're in the process of, like I said, we're also retooling, reworking certain things on the school for the online school. When that gets back up, we'll put that back out along with information. But you can all folks can always follow us, be a part of our different, mailing lists that we have, because we're going to be putting information out there. I mean, this is going to be, 2021 is a busy year as we get, well, not busy, productive year as we get ready for 2022 to be able to go ahead and say, all right, now we're going to be reaching out to these folks saying, like, do you want to buy, you want to keep this land or not? You want to buy some land or not? You want to move down here? Great, love to have you. As we go ahead and really be able to dig in and really be able to strive and struggle, because as we said, like, folks like that one of the people that was interviewed in that article, the New York Times article, one of the people was my grandfather. He has passed. He returned to Allah. He transitioned. That was top of 2019. We wanted, we want to be able to do different things to, honor that legacy and honor that thinking. I know for me, I think it's important for me to be able to step into those footsteps as others that have been in the community. We want everybody to go ahead and fill in and to do what they can, help pass the word, pass the message, ring the bell, say, hey, come on in. Because I want for, if my children choose to be involved with it, that's fine. But I want them to be able to see, look at the example that Dad did, look at the example that other, like, some of the other folks that, Dad went through these different things. I'll sit back and talk to them about stories, like the situation with the young lady whose boat capsized, like the situation of us picketing in front of the courthouses, like the situation of us being kind of railroaded by the then superintendent, giving us a hard time about supporting Ramadan. They know these stories, they're aware of them, and just to say, like, if it's something that they find important, to be involved with it. I'm not going to browbeat anybody to do it. We just want to be able to show a shining example and say, aha, I definitely want to be, I can see myself. I'm in Wisconsin. I want to move my family here. I'm in Washington State. I want to move my family down here. I'm over here in LA. I'm tired of this traffic. What do you mean that I can actually live and bring my family over there and survive off 75K, 90K a year, and my family can be all right? Rethink this, all those different things. So
I wonder if people in Chicago, because I know, because of the Great Migration, everyone in Chicago has some Mississippi roots. Everybody in Detroit got some Alabama roots.
Mississippi, Alabama roots, yeah.
Bring them all, especially given Chicago's, their history of violence in the last, 10 years or so, particularly with Black men and Black women and Black children. Hey, it could be an option.
That's right. And that's by all means, people go through different things, and we're not going to try to browbeat anybody, but what we will do is market better. That is one thing that we can definitely attest that we're going to be doing, is marketing better and be able to say, this is how things are going to happen. We're working on how that structure is going to look like, so that way we can tell people easily, we've got 13 acres that have come up here. We've got this right here. We've got that right here. This is the cost. These are the things. And that's one thing that's a big market in Mississippi, is construction. So the cost of building a house on land that you own is not a lot. It's not a lot. And, we've had no real issues or problems with law enforcement area. I ain't saying that, in this day and age, unfortunately, we got stupid people that do stupid stuff. I remember one time we called 911. I had a cat that I loved, and the cat got stuck in a tree, and I called 911. I didn't even tell my mom and dad about it. I called 911, and the fire department came to get the cat out the tree. And it was hilarious. You know what I'm saying? This was years ago. But I'm just saying, just different things. They were like, he's like, I've been a firefighter. This guy came out. He's like, I've been a firefighter 7 years. I've never had this call, and I'm actually glad to get it. It's just,
right.
So I was like, I might have been like 10 or 11. I can't remember, but it was hilarious. But I just say all these different things that, with simple living, simple life, yes, Mississippi does have its ugly history and sometimes ugly present, but by all means, we want people to know that New Medina acts to be a buffer And as we say on our website, an environment that makes it easy to remember the Creator, then remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's what we do. We've been working with Unitarian Universalist Church. They're some of our longest standing allies. They'll come out in Jumu'ah just regularly. They'll be like, they just won't come out and do it. We've got several folks that donate to New Medina regularly. We've got folks that do that offer their support, their services, their resources, their experience, their expertise. We do those different things, and some of those folks, like I said, they ain't got no last name Abdul-Haqq, they ain't got no first name Naeem. These folks are doing different things, and we just want and we support, people around us too. We've got initiatives. Like I said, we just did that food drive. New Medina was a key part of it. And me coming from New Medina, I made sure that New Medina was on the forefront of it, even though it was my organization that we had started. Like, yeah, New Medina's gonna be a part of this. So, and we brought everybody out and was really helping that day. But just we really want folks to be aware, your listening audience to be aware, your viewers to be aware that there's still a lot of the spirit of Elijahville is still living here. And, it's a generation or two separated, but we definitely want to be able to come through, establish those different things. I know if you come within the next 2 years, I'd love to have some folks as neighbors. So that's what's going on, inshallah.
Now I have to ask you, because I asked, I told you I had two guests last season, Rabia Ahmed and Rabia Terborg. Rabia Terborg, she grew up in Queens, and then after the split with the Darul Islam, her family moved to South Carolina with the Jamaat Fuqara. And then there was Rabia Ahmed, who we had in January, and she was born and grew up in West Valley. And I asked her, I said, what are some of the best practices when it comes to Muslims living together? Because we all know these stories about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his community and in Medina, and it sounds so wonderful, and the Ansar and Wajah and all of these things, but in this day and age, dealing with our people sometimes it's a little rough dealing with our people. So what are some of the best practices for Muslims, especially predominantly Black Muslim communities?
I would say, in my opinion, from dealing with some of the things that I dealt with in high school and college and everything else from outside, and even how to be able to come up with a structure, check your pride at the door. I mean, it's just be like, if there's something that's happening, if you're going to go in terms of things, in terms of Sunnah, in terms of things, in terms of Quran, in terms of Hadith, in terms of Sharia, if you're looking at different things, all very well and good. Look at that cumulatively. If there's something that's happened that you're disagreeing on, there's something that's happened that's causing static, something that's happened that's causing a rift or a division, actively and cumulatively look at ways of how to be able to separate that. Like if you see that something's happening, not trying to stifle it or not trying to suffocate it like it's a fire or cauterize it like it's some kind of disease festering. No, go to that situation and come to it with a level of humility and check your pride at the door. Check that bad taste in your mouth. There's an old Japanese saying that no one ever died from indigestion from swallowing a sarcastic remark. Check that and be able to say, like, there's no need to how can we be able to get to the bottom of this? Because the whole point ultimately is for us to be able to have a flourishing ummah, right? Right. The whole point is to be able to have something that makes sense, something that looks healthy, something that is healthy, something that's cultivated and representative of what someone came there to begin with. And I think that's one of the main things. Sometimes individuals can do certain different things and you may not agree with it. You'd be like, well, this, that, and third, and they go, how did he say that? I'm like, okay, yeah, yes, you're right, yes. But this person is bringing forth a grievance for a reason. Let's go ahead and find something that makes sense and works for everyone. I think that's important. I think that's important to be able to see where it is and what it is that people may or may not have static on. And again, maybe just checking your pride at the door, checking your emotions or feelings at the door, and find out what exactly it is so we can come to common ground. I think that would be helpful. I've been in on conversations with folks, whether it was outside or external other communities or New Medina, or been guests or visitors at another Oma, and something pop off and you're like, whoa. I'm leave. Or nah, brother, you stay here, you guest, we don't, like, I don't know if I want, but I think you always, like you said, sometimes how we do different things and be a certain way and then say, well, this is what we need to do. I think, and then whatever the practice is, try not to deviate from it. I know for me, one of my pet peeves is a double standard. And I think a double standard will always be hypocrisy. So if what's the old saying goes, what's good for the goose is worth taking a gander at. It's a knockoff of the whole organization. It's heard from elsewhere. But take a look at it, see what it is, and let's try to apply that to practice and let that be the way that we move forward as policy. Let that be the way you move forward as practice, and be able to say, hey, let's look at this. How should we do different things? I think that's one of the main things, because regardless of Islam or not, regardless of color your skin or not, you're all people. You're still a man. You're still a woman. You're a person that deserves respect. So I think checking the emotions at the door and coming up with a simple, common way of being able to address the situation or address a certain thing, that speaks volumes.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, because even in BAM, and BAM is an online community, it's not a face-to-face, person-to-person, but it has come up, with members who were disgruntled, rightfully so, because they saw a double standard. And like you said, double standard is always hypocrisy. Always, there's just no way to justify it. And so I think that's a good lesson for us, BAM staff and BAM members, to remember that, if we have got to stick to it. Whatever the standard is, you can't enforce something on one group of people and not enforce it on other people, because like you said, there's hypocrisy, and then it breeds like these seeds of animosity, and then that spirit of community is gone. So if we can't even do that in an online community, you definitely can't do it in an actual community where you're living together. So I'm glad that you definitely brought that up. It really struck a nerve with me, that particular point. But Brother Sabir, I want to thank you so much. This was a godsend, because sometimes I think about things, I don't actually make dua about it, like formal dua about it, but I'll just think about it and I'll say, oh, I wish I had such and such and such, and Allah always delivers. And wallahi, when I read that article, and then a couple months later, I interviewed Rabia Ahmed about her experience in West Valley. And I told her, I was like, yeah, there's this community down that I read about, and it's called New Medina. It's in Mississippi, but I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody down there. And alhamdulillah, last month or so, I was just checking the group requests, people who wanted to join BAM, and I saw your name, and I read the answer to the questionnaire. And it said New Medina. And I was just like, alhamdulillah, Allah always answers my prayers, even when I don't even make the formal prayer.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. I think I've been following since being in. I've been following. It's definitely one of the more robust groups, and I've been learning about different initiatives and different things that's happening. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to be in there and being a part of the discourse and discussion.
Definitely. We love having new members, and we love when the new members always, because you had agreed to do this interview before your request was even approved. Yes, so, I definitely appreciate that. I'm sure that this summer, usually my Sunday stories are live, but this summer, because of, everything opening back up and people being out more, so I decided to pre-record these, because most people are probably out doing what they do, things that they couldn't do in 2020 when we were on lockdown. But I'm hoping that when people watch this video, because there have been discussions in the group about people who are like, listen, I'm tired of living where I am, or I want my children to have a different upbringing. And I'm sure this video will definitely be of interest of them. We're going to include all the links. So if people want to learn more about New Medina, to move down there, or maybe they want to check in, make sure they, you know, their grandfather, you know, grandmama has some land, you know, if they want to move or they want to sell it, you know, they could definitely, you know, contact you and go and follow all the links online. But again, thank you so much. This has been, I've been looking forward to this. I look forward to all my Sunday story guests, but I've really been looking for, I'm very intrigued by Black Muslim communities that are not in the cities. So because, you know, rural life is not something that, you know, you really associate with Black folks, especially Black Muslims. But thank you again. And next week, inshallah, everybody will be taking a break for July 4th. I'm not getting into whether Muslims should be celebrating the 4th of July or not. I'm just saying, you know, so if you want to barbecue, if you want to do whatever, then I wish you a safe weekend. And we will be seeing you all again on July 11th, inshallah. And then after that, on the 18th, again, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Thanks again for having me.
Thank you.